Thanks very much, Natasha, and thanks everyone for your patience today. So as I said earlier, I've been at ICH for quite some time now, and I've been really lucky to work in the nutrition group with Mary and Atul here, and we've done some really excellent research looking at early nutrition and the effects on long-term health. So really, this is an example of how Lee as an AHP has worked in the group and integrated nutrition and dietary aspects into one of our studies and to take that through to implementation. So I know we're running a bit short on time. So which one moves it on? Oh, sorry. That's it. Okay, so I'm sure I don't need to say this to everybody here, but childhood obesity is probably the most serious nutrition-related disease facing today's children. And as I said, it has serious effects both on short and long-term health. And importantly, it's very hard to treat. And once it becomes established, it's really difficult to reverse. We heard from Adrian about tackling adult obesity, and it's a really difficult area. So once it begins, it tracks through childhood into adult life often, and there it's associated with increased risk of serious diseases. And we do know that it is a disease of early childhood because most excess weight is gained during those preschool years. And it's estimated that around the world now, more than 40 million children under 5 are affected by overweight or obesity. So it's a problem of some magnitude. These are the most recent figures from our National Child Measurement Programme in the UK, recorded during the pandemic on a smaller but nevertheless considered representative sample, when we saw that the prevalence of overweight had gone up to almost 30% in preschool children, and now nearly 15% of them have obesity. So the numbers are staggering and huge. And to put it simply, of course, it can be seen as a result of an energy imbalance when the energy taken in through foods and drinks is more than is needed to go about our day-to-day activities and for growth and development. So there are two sides to the coin, of course, but certainly dietary habits are critical during this preschool period. This is when dietary habits are being laid down, when they become established and are likely to be taken forward through life. So we know that children, very early in life, by around 3, will have distinct dietary patterns, so they'll then be set down and taken through into later life. So the other side of the coin, of course, is physical activity, which is important, but really it's diet that has the greatest impact. So, of course, no one would argue that physical activity isn't highly beneficial, but it's far more easy to take in extra energy than it is to burn up calories. So we're looking at that balance between energy intake and expenditure. So that comes to the question, what can we do to prevent or manage overweight and obesity in preschool children? And this is something that we tackled in our research group. So the aims at this age, of course, are not to get children to lose weight and also not to label them as overweight or obese. So it's quite difficult to find a really good outcome measure, but the recommended one still is to look at body mass index or BMI relative to age and sex. So the objective in these very young children then is to try and keep those who aren't overweight, and we want to reduce risk, to maintain the BMI Z score they're at and keep them at a healthy weight. So that's in those children who are at increased risk but not already classified as being overweight. And in those children who are already overweight, we don't want to cut their calories and get them to lose weight, but rather we want to get them growing along a lower centile. So we want to reduce their BMI for age and sex. So at the population level, this is what NICE, the National Institute of Care Excellence, recommends, that we use multi-component weight management programs that target both those areas of diet, healthy eating habits, and physical activity. So that includes reducing time spent sedentary. We already see that these young children are spending time on computers, watching TV. So it's targeting the whole holistic approach. And importantly, of course, in these young children, but in all families, really, it's important to include at least one family member. And we're trying to change behaviours, which, of course, is a very difficult thing to do. So we need the support of the parents behind the child. So what research shows us and what systematic reviews show us is that lifestyle interventions can be effective in reducing obesity risk. And importantly, they're most effective where both aspects of the energy balance equation are addressed. So we need to look at dietary intake and physical activity behaviours together. And we also need to include at least one other family member. And what comes out of these reviews, really importantly, is that we get the biggest effect when we intervene in the youngest children. So bigger reductions in BMI Z-score can be found in children under 6 compared to older children. And this is really reflecting how difficult it is once those habits become entrenched. So it really is about prevention rather than cure. We know it's very hard to pick up the pieces. So it's really important to try and prevent obesity. So this is sort of the implementation phase of our research. So we developed as a multidisciplinary team, including doctors, dietitians, social workers, exercise physiologists. A whole team of us developed a healthy lifestyle program. So this is the Planet Munch program, and it took place over 6 months. This is the minimum recommended time period that NICE says. And working with this young age group, it's really hard to engage them, particularly for such a long period of time. So we worked with a group of community artists, a mad bunch who turned all our wild ideas into physical manifestations, as you'll see. So we incorporated art workshops where children and families work together on nutritional themes to learn about healthy eating, subliminally probably in these youngest children. We got them to work together on our themed songs that we created for the programme, so they danced around together in music and movement sessions. We had a healthy snack session where families came together to eat and learn about what were the best choices and try new foods. We didn't really split mums and children up very much, but here we just did brief interactive education with mums around healthy eating and lifestyle. And children played short games to build sort of 10-minute exercises that they could do at home as well as in the programme. So a very nice sort of colourful interactive programme. And these are some of the characters that we created. So trying very much to put a positive spin on nutrition, to give them all healthy names, healthy characters, and then a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also presenting sort of high-energy foods as perhaps those that shouldn't be as desirable as some of the families and children think they are. So we had to make it quite fun. In the second half of the programme, we consolidated messages learned during the first half by doing very practical sessions. So you can see there that children love learning how to be chefs, and the concept was that food can be healthy, nothing's forbidden, it's just what you have and how you have it. And you can see this little boy here is literally licking his lips with glee at the idea of having his banana stegosaurus that he's created. So they really do get on board. And I think if you start encouraging children to get involved with food, that's a really good positive first step. In our group, we're really famous for very robust science, and we evaluate everything in randomized controlled trials where possible. So we did this with the Planet Munch intervention. So children were randomized all together at the outset as a family randomization. One group would have the intervention immediately, and another group would go on a waiting list and have the intervention 6 months later. So that made it ethically fair because everybody was offered the intervention. So this allowed us to do a randomized comparison at 6 month stage when one group had been intervened with and the other group was still waiting. So we had a reasonable sample size. In the first trial, we randomized high-risk children. So these were children who were already overweight or at risk. Roughly even numbers of boys and girls, on average 2.5, with a mean BMI of 18.5. And just for context, that's above the overweight centile for that age group. So as a group, all children were above the 91st centile. We had good completion, 3/4 attended all sessions, and 3/4 of the sessions and completed the programme. And at the end, the children in the intervention group had a lower BMI Z-score compared with those who hadn't yet taken part. The effect size was quite large here as well. We'll talk about that later on. Importantly, we had some long-term follow-up in our children as well. So almost half were followed up to 2 years following taking part in the programme. And importantly, we still saw a maintenance of the reduction in BMI Z-score. So the effect size had gone down a bit, but that's still clinically important as it would represent a third of the distance across a major centile band. We did another trial then with all preschool children to look at the ability of the intervention for prevention. And again, we had very similar figures completing the programme, so it's feasible and acceptable. And we had a significant and reasonable effect size at the end of the intervention of a third of the standard deviation Z-score. Importantly, we measured many outcomes. I can't go into the details of them all here, but I was having a discussion with Mary only this week about what really is the best outcome for these young children. Is it BMI or are there other measures? So we know that change in behaviour, for example, improving diet might have an effect further down the road. But importantly, it's hard to measure body fatness in this group, but you can measure waist circumference. We're also looking again now at measuring waist to height ratio. And importantly, I think we saw a reduction in health outcomes, so cardiovascular measures like the blood pressure, and heart rate, which were also lower following participation in the programme. So again, about half the group were followed up. This time we only had enough funding to keep going for a year, but they managed to maintain that effect. So it does seem that these interventions in very young children are working. And that brings me to my take-home messages that having extra weight in childhood is a very serious problem. It's got complex causes, begins early, it's difficult to reverse, and is associated with adverse health outcomes. And most importantly, I haven't put this on here, but interventions do show that they have an impact and can be effective at reducing this. So just to finish by thanking all of those families who took part in Planet Munch and the other studies that we've done down the years at the Childhood Nutrition Research Centre, and to all of you for listening and for coming along today. Thanks very much. To take any questions, but I think we're a bit pushed for time. But go on, Graham.
Where do you stand on gut microbiome? There's huge research out there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's growing all the time, but there are definitely associations there. But I think that's the key word, isn't it? What we've got are associations, and I think this is what you're going to be working on, isn't it, Mona, going forward, looking much more at this area?
Just one quick thing, you're starting in 2.5.
Yeah, our starting age, our age range was 1 to 5. Our mean age was 2.5.
Right. You might be worth looking at the data again, because when you animal diet plan, they were in the track 3. You might explore the 3 and you might see a better outcome. Because, that intervention. And let's say the microbiome will become more healthier. The older you get, it's very difficult to start changing it.
Yeah.
So I really think that's
yeah, no, thanks a lot for that. I think it's a really interesting area. And what we were looking at here really was feasibility. And we will go on to hopefully do larger trials, cluster randomized trials, and it would be fantastic to include some of those really interesting measures there too. Thank you.